Open the gates of Janus and let slip the hogs of war. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Drunk History with Graf. This is a series in which I drink some alcohol and talk about history, starting from the Bronze Age, going all the way up to present day. Now, I might sound slightly different in this episode to previously, because I have since moved, I'm in a new place, and I'm also trying out the lazy purple trick of recording underneath a blanket, so hopefully the audio should be a little bit better than last time. Last episode we talked about the First Punic War, the first clash between Rome and its arch-nemesis, Carthage. In this episode, we're going to hopefully talk about at least some of the second great clash between these two powers. This is a very grand and expansive and very detailed story, which means I'm likely not going to be able to cover it in a single episode. But I will get as much done as I can and will hopefully cover the rest in the next episode. So, at the end of last episode we left off just after the First Punic War. The Mediterranean looks like this, with Rome having gobbled up Sicily. Now with this episode we're probably going to start with a very important character by the name of Hamilcar Barca. He is the start of a huge amount of stuff that goes on in this time period. He starts off as a general, a Carthaginian general, in the First Punic War, and he brings his army onto Sicily and fights against the Romans pretty successfully with the hand that he's given. He's given far too small of an army and not a whole lot of provision, which means that he has to do a lot of basically guerrilla war, shadowing the Roman army rather than engaging outright. But this means that by the end of the war, despite the fact that Carthage has been defeated, Hamilcar hasn't, and his army is still intact, and they retreat to Africa. Now in the last episode I mentioned how Carthage fights its wars through mercenaries, and Hamilcar is no exception. He's not a mercenary, but he commands an army of mercenaries who were provided to him by Carthage. Mercenaries, or as they're also known, soldiers of fortune, they only fight for one thing, which is money. And money is something which Carthage doesn't really have. Now, I forgot to mention an important detail last episode. I said that after the war, Rome imposed on Carthage reparations equaling 3,200 talents. Now, what I didn't specify was what a talent is. Now, a talent is an old Mesopotamian measure of weight, which in this case was to be paid in silver. So that meant that in total 3,200 talents in today's money, in terms of today's cost of silver and of money, would be 43 million Great British pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but back then people had a lot less. I'm also going to put up conversions for dollars for people who live in America, and conversions for euros for people who live elsewhere. Now, as I said, this is a huge amount of money for the time, which means that Carthage now can't afford to pay its mercenaries. That's a very big problem, since last time we established what mercenaries do when they can't get paid. So these mercenaries ended up doing exactly the same thing. They rebelled against Carthage and started sacking the nearby countryside. And that's just the mercenaries in Africa. There were other mercenaries across the Carthaginian Empire that were doing the same thing. There were some mercenaries in Sardinia who rebelled on the basis that they weren't being paid. Carthage sent back another band of mercenaries who were being paid less to try and retake Sardinia, but they rebelled too and joined the rebels in Sardinia. Now, Sardinia is known for being home to some of the fiercest people in the world, and they didn't really appreciate having these angry mercenaries on their shores either, so a popular uprising displaced them. These outcast mercenaries ended up in Rome, where they begged the Romans to invade and annex Sardinia, and Rome didn't really want to do this. Eventually though, after 3 years of pleading, the Romans invaded Sardinia. The Carthaginians protested, but the Romans said that if they attempted to send another group to take Sardinia back, it would be considered an act of war. And this is another thing that seriously hurts Roman-Carthaginian relationships to an irreparable level. So Hamilcar ends up basically being forced to assemble his own army out of his own pocket to go and put down all of these rebellious mercenaries, which, to his credit, he does very successfully. And this puts him and his family, the Barcas, in very good standing in Carthage and makes him very powerful. That comes with its own set of problems, however, as now Carthage basically shifts all of the responsibility for fixing everything that's broken onto him, because he's seen as one of the only responsible people able to actually do anything about it. So he comes up with a plan, a secret plan that he tells no one. And he goes to the Carthaginian Senate and he suggests to them that they should marshal another army and go and take some more tribute out of Carthage's conquered kingdoms in Africa. He, however, doesn't do this. Hamilcar instead assembles his army, crosses the Straits of Gibraltar into Iberia, and goes and starts conquering territory there. You see, Iberia has silver mines, and that is very valuable to Carthage for obvious reasons, especially given that this war reparations that Rome demanded was supposed to be in silver. Hamilcar never actually told the Carthaginian Senate what he was doing, and they probably would not have approved. But he was very successful, took over all of this territory, and immediately started shipping silver back to Carthage, where it was promptly sent to Rome. There is also an interesting story about him bringing his young son Hannibal over to Iberia with him, and while he's there, he makes a sacrifice to the Carthaginian Phoenician gods, and he asks that Hannibal, his young son, swear an oath on it. This oath being to never be a friend of Rome, and to never give the Romans the benefit of the doubt, basically. This is going to become important later. What Hamilcar does at this point is he essentially starts carving out his own kingdom in Iberia. Now, he was not going to go and declare independence from Carthage, of course he wasn't. He created this kingdom specifically so that it could be a vassal of Carthage. And while he was there, he went and he founded a number of cities. Some of the most prominent ones being New Carthage, which actually, believe it or not, still is around today, albeit with a new name, is now called Cartagena, or Cartagena. He also founded another city that bore his own name, called Barcino, and nowadays this city is called Barcelona. Yeah, it was founded by an African. Albeit some people are actually sort of debating the origin of the name. Some people suggest that Barcino might actually be Iberian in origin and it might mean something completely different. But that's not important. Hamilcar's new kingdom started stretching out across Spain. This started to worry the Romans, because in the treaty that ended the First Punic War, they, among other things, divided Iberia between them, and they put down a line along the river Ebro, was supposed to demarcate where Carthaginian influence was supposed to end and Roman influence was to begin. And the Barcid Kingdom was expanding awfully close to the river Ebro. And this worried the Romans quite significantly, because remember that not too long ago Hamilcar had been fighting against Rome in the First Punic War. So they sent a legion over to confront Hamilcar about what was going on and what he was doing there. And according to legend, Hamilcar personally approached the head of this legion and told him, "I am only here to procure the silver that we need to pay you for the war indemnity we owe from the previous war that we've fought. So fuck off." And the Romans accept this and promptly fuck off. What happens after this isn't particularly well written down for a few years, but not too long after this, Hamilcar is fighting against an Iberian tribe, and he is killed in battle. The exact stories differ as to what exactly happened to him. Some stories say that Hamilcar was attempting to parley with the victorious tribe in order to give his army and his sons who were with him a chance to escape. Other sources suggest that maybe he was attempting to flee with the army as they were losing, and while they were crossing a river, he was thrown from his horse and drowned in the river. It's not entirely known. Either way, he died shortly after this, and the kingdom passed to his son, Hamilcar Barca. Hannibal, who would be one of the legends of the ancient world. Hannibal continues his father's policy of expanding into Iberia, and he ends up attacking a city called Saguntum. And the location of Saguntum, this is where that treaty with the river Ebro comes up again. You see, the Romans evidently weren't too well versed in Iberia to know that Saguntum was south of the river and well within the Carthaginian sphere of influence. So they claimed that Saguntum had been unlawfully attacked by the Carthaginians. Although, having said that, Barcelona is well north of this river and is without doubt a violation of this treaty. So the attack on Saguntum probably is not a legitimate cause for war, yet the Romans take it and run with it. Barcelona's mere existence, though, perhaps is a cause for war, but the Romans completely fucking ignore it. Oh, that was kind of entertaining. So a Roman envoy is sent to the Carthaginian Senate to basically demand that Hannibal be arrested and handed over to the Romans for breaking the treaty. Basically, they were giving the Carthaginians an option of throwing Hannibal under the bus and avoiding the war. The Carthaginian Senate refuses to hand him over, though. The Roman envoy gets kind of angry, and he tells the Carthaginians, "I hold in this hand peace, and in this hand war. What do you choose?" Again, he's trying to urge the Carthaginians to choose peace. The Carthaginian Senate shouts at the envoy, "Choose what you will." This is a deliberate rhetorical dodge, because they know that saying this is going to force the Romans to choose war. Now, they could have said, "I choose war," but they wanted the Romans to choose war. And this is exactly what happens. The Carthaginians shout at the Roman envoy saying, "Choose what you will," and the Romans shout, "I choose war." And he's greeted with roars of approval from the Carthaginian Senate, shouting, "We accept it!" Now, Rome had a very big misconception as to how this war was going to be. They expected this was going to be an offensive war, so they assembled some legions and got ready to invade Africa. But this really was not how things were going to work, and before they could do it, the Carthaginians attacked them first. Specifically, Hannibal attacked them first. Hannibal was being kept apprised of everything that was going on, and after having sworn the oath with his father that he was never to be a friend to Rome, he was prepared for this. In fact, there is some speculation among historians that perhaps Hamilcar had prepared this in advance and had passed this plan that he had down to Hannibal, and that he had orchestrated this entire thing. The plan is that Hannibal is going to take his Carthaginian army and invade Italy from the north. Now, this comes with its own set of problems. This is a map of the area of the route that he was going to have to take. Now, what he could do is take this route along the coast. This is a comparatively flat and easily traversable area that he could use to get to Italy. However, this comes with the same problem that came with the Persians trying to invade Greece, which is that the Romans could block this fairly easily. It's not a very wide area. Now, the Romans do not have the same advantages over the Carthaginians that the Greeks had over the Persians, but that doesn't matter. All the Romans would need to do was stall the Carthaginians for long enough for the legions being assembled in southern Italy to get to Africa and destroy Carthage. So, Hannibal, instead, has to go this way. That's the Alps. That is extremely difficult to traverse. There are mountains in this range that didn't get climbed by humans until the 19th century. That is how tough this area is to cross. This is a gamble, and everyone knows it. Well, except for the Romans. The Romans think it's completely impossible. And this is made even worse by the fact that Hannibal brings elephants with him. Carthage employs war elephants, and they have to come across the Alps as well. Now, this poses a massive challenge, because not only are elephants massive and clumsy, they're also a logistical nightmare. Now, in the military community, there is a saying which is attributed to Napoleon Bonaparte, and it goes like this: amateurs discuss tactics, professionals discuss logistics. If you can't keep your army supplied, they will die. If you cannot keep your army fed, they will starve. Therefore, no matter how strong your army is, if you cannot supply them with food, it doesn't matter. And elephants eat a shit ton. There's not a lot of stuff to eat in the Alps, which means that Hannibal has to rely on a baggage train sent from Iberia. And that's not easy, especially as they have to pass through parts of Gaul, and the Alps themselves are inhabited by angry Gallic mountain tribes that are not particularly friendly to the Carthaginians, nor to the Romans. This is why Hannibal's crossing of the Alps is legendary in military circles, because everyone thought it was impossible. And aside from the fact that going the easy way would be too long, this is otherwise suicidally stupid. And Hannibal loses a shit ton of people over these mountains. Loads of people freeze to death, get frostbite, fall off cliffs, or die in ambushes by mountain people. But it is completely and totally worth it. Hannibal emerges from the other side of the Alps and takes the Roman garrison in the north of Italy completely by surprise, entirely demolishing them. Now, in some other history series, this is where people talk about elephants' effects in warfare, and this is where I'm going to do it as well. They often paint this as being Rome's first encounter with elephants. That's actually false. And 2 episodes ago, when Pyrrhus of Epirus invaded Italy, he brought with him war elephants, and Rome faced the elephants there. So this is not the first time that Rome has encountered war elephants. However, that does not mean that these Romans, that the Carthaginians encountered on the near side of the Alps, had seen elephants before or knew what they were. So the claims that other historians have made that to the Romans, elephants would appear like fighting monsters is not too far-fetched. Because elephants are really monstrous. Now I'm going to bring up the measure of war graph here. Warfare between Rome and Carthage normally looked something like this. Infantry was still pretty dominant, although cavalry wasn't far behind. The introduction of elephants, on the other hand, suddenly turns it into this. Elephants take the role of shock cavalry to break through infantry lines. Because elephants, surprise surprise, are fucking terrifying. And now that Hannibal has emerged in northern Italy, suddenly the invasion of Carthage has to be called off. Rome panics. This wasn't supposed to happen, because crossing the Alps is supposed to be impossible. And suddenly, there's a massive Carthaginian army in northern Italy bearing down on them, and they have to divert troops to go and fight it. And that is where I'm going to conclude this episode, and we're going to talk about the rest of the Second Punic War in the next episode. This has been Graf. I will see you next time. Thank you very much.